It was a cold winter evening in a small, run-down neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago. The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying with it a bitter chill that cut through even the thickest of coats. In a tiny, dilapidated apartment, a woman named Emma sat by the window, gazing out at the bleak, snow-covered world beyond. She was a woman of simple means, living paycheck to paycheck, barely scraping by on her job as a cleaning lady at a nearby office building. Her life had been filled with hardship, but she was resilient, her heart filled with a quiet strength that had carried her through every storm. Emma had always dreamed of having a family, but life had not been kind to her in that regard. She had no children of her own, no husband to share her life with. Yet, despite her loneliness, she found comfort in the small acts of kindness she performed for others. She was known in her neighborhood as the woman with a heart of gold, always willing to lend a hand to those in need, even when she had little to give. One fateful night, as Emma made her way home from work, she decided to take a shortcut through a narrow alley that ran behind a row of old, abandoned buildings. The wind whipped through the alley, causing her to shiver as she pulled her coat tighter around her frail body. As she hurried along, eager to escape the cold, she heard a faint, pitiful cry. It was so soft that she almost missed it, but something deep within her made her stop and listen. The cry came again, this time louder, more desperate. Emma's heart quickened as she followed the sound to a large metal trash can at the end of the alley. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid, peering inside with a mixture of fear and hope. To her utter shock, she found a tiny newborn baby girl, wrapped in nothing but a thin, dirty blanket. The baby was pale, her lips blue from the cold, her cries growing weaker by the second. Tears filled Emma's eyes as she carefully lifted the fragile child into her arms, cradling her close to her chest to shield her from the biting wind. She knew in that moment that this little girl had been abandoned, left to die in the cold, cruel world. But Emma also knew that she couldn't just walk away, leaving the child to her fate. She had been given a chance to save a life, and she wasn't going to let that chance slip away. Without a second thought, Emma rushed home, her mind racing with worry. She had no experience with babies, no idea how to care for one, but she knew she had to try. When she arrived at her tiny apartment, she quickly set to work, doing everything in her power to warm the baby and keep her safe. She wrapped the child in every blanket she could find, holding her close as she whispered soothing words of comfort. Over the next few hours, Emma did everything she could to nurse the baby back to health. She fed her with what little milk she had, rocked her gently in her arms, and sang lullabies she remembered from her own childhood. As the night wore on, the baby's cries softened, and she began to settle into a peaceful sleep. Emma knew that she couldn't keep the child. She had no money, no resources, no way to provide for a baby. But as she looked down at the tiny, innocent face sleeping in her arms, she couldn't bear the thought of giving her up. This baby had been abandoned once before, and Emma couldn't let that happen again. She made a promise to herself and to the child that she would do whatever it took to protect her, to give her the life she deserved. The next morning, Emma went to the local authorities and explained the situation. She feared they would take the baby away, but instead, they were moved by her story and agreed to let her foster the child while they searched for a more permanent solution. Emma named the baby Grace, a symbol of the unexpected blessing that had come into her life. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and as time passed, Emma and Grace formed an unbreakable bond. Emma found herself becoming more and more attached to the child, pouring all of her love and care into raising her. Despite the challenges, Emma never once regretted her decision. Grace brought joy and light into her life, filling the emptiness she had felt for so long. Emma worked harder than ever to provide for Grace, taking on extra jobs and making sacrifices to ensure the little girl had everything she needed. The neighbors who had once pitied Emma for her lonely, difficult life now admired her strength and determination. They watched in awe as this once quiet woman transformed into a fierce, loving mother who would do anything for her child. As the years went by, Grace grew into a bright, happy little girl, full of curiosity and wonder. Emma made sure she had the best education she could afford, and she taught Grace the values that had guided her own life: kindness, resilience, and the importance of helping others. Emma's love for Grace was boundless, and it showed in everything she did. One day, when Grace was about 5 years old, a well-dressed couple came to Emma's door. They introduced themselves as the child's biological parents, who had been searching for her ever since they had realized the terrible mistake they had made. They begged Emma to give Grace back, offering her money and a better life for the child. Emma's heart broke at the thought of losing Grace, but she knew she had to do what was best for the little girl. She took a deep breath and told the couple the truth, that Grace was her daughter now, that they had no right to take her away. She explained how she had found the baby abandoned, how she had nursed her back to health, how she had loved and cared for her as if she were her own flesh and blood. The couple listened in silence, their faces a mixture of shock and sorrow. They realized the depth of Emma's love for Grace, and they knew they could never take her away from the only mother she had ever known. They thanked Emma for everything she had done and left, their hearts heavy with regret, but also with gratitude for the woman who had saved their daughter's life. Emma and Grace continued their lives together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Emma never told Grace about the couple who had come to take her away, knowing that the truth would only bring pain. Instead, she focused on giving Grace the best life possible, filled with love, laughter, and endless support. Years later, when Grace was all grown up, she discovered the truth on her own. But by then, she had already come to understand what it meant to be truly loved. She knew that Emma was her real mother, the woman who had found her in a trash can and had given her a second chance at life. Grace was forever grateful to Emma, and she vowed to honor her mother's legacy by living a life of kindness and compassion, just as Emma had taught her. And so, Emma's love and sacrifice were never forgotten. They lived on in Grace, in the countless lives she touched, and in the hearts of everyone who knew their story, a story of love, hope, and the incredible power of a mother's unwavering devotion. As Grace grew older, the bond between her and Emma only deepened. Emma, who had once been a lonely woman struggling to find her place in the world, now had a purpose that filled every corner of her life. Grace was a reflection of everything good that Emma had poured into her: love, kindness, and an unyielding spirit. Grace excelled in school, and her teachers often remarked on her intelligence and compassion. She was the kind of child who stood up for others, who reached out to those in need, and who brought light into every room she entered. Emma couldn't have been prouder. She saw in Grace all the possibilities that had once seemed out of reach for herself. Despite the hardships they faced, Grace never felt lacking in anything because Emma's love was more than enough. As Grace approached her teenage years, the question of her origins began to surface in her mind. She knew that Emma was her mother in every way that mattered, but she couldn't shake the curiosity about where she had come from. Emma had always been honest with Grace about how they came to be a family, but there were details that had been left out, details that Grace was now eager to understand. One evening, as they sat together at the small kitchen table after dinner, Grace finally found the courage to ask. "Mom," she began hesitantly, "can you tell me more about the day you found me? I know you've told me before, but I feel like there's more to the story." Emma's heart tightened. She had known this day would come, but she had hoped it would be later, when Grace was older and better equipped to handle the truth. Still, she had always vowed to be honest with her daughter. Taking a deep breath, Emma began, "It was a cold night, colder than most. I was on my way home, and I remember feeling more tired than usual. I had taken a different route that night, through an alley. That's when I heard you crying. I followed the sound and found you there, alone, in a trash can. You were so small, Grace, and so cold. I knew I couldn't leave you. I brought you home and did everything I could to keep you safe." Grace listened intently, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions, love for the woman who had saved her and a burning curiosity about the life she might have had. "Were they looking for me?" Grace asked softly. Emma hesitated, but she knew she couldn't keep the truth from Grace any longer. "Yes, they were. When you were about 5 years old, a couple came looking for you. They were your biological parents. They wanted to take you back." Grace's eyes widened. "Why didn't you let them?" Emma reached across the table, taking Grace's hands in hers. "Because you were already my daughter by then, in every way that mattered. They might have given you life, but I gave you a home, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. I told them how much I loved you and that you belonged with me. They understood, and they left without you." Grace felt a swirl of emotions, gratefulness, confusion, and a deep, aching sadness for the parents she had never known. "Do you think they regret leaving me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma squeezed her hands. "I think they do. But they also knew you were where you were meant to be. And so do I. Grace, they might have brought you into this world, but it was you who brought meaning into mine. I never regretted a single moment of raising you." Tears welled up in Grace's eyes as she processed her mother's words. She realized that Emma had made an incredible sacrifice to keep her, one that had shaped both their lives in profound ways. "I love you, Mom," Grace whispered, leaning in to hug Emma tightly. "Thank you for choosing me." As the years went by, Grace's curiosity about her biological parents remained, but it was tempered by the overwhelming love and gratitude she felt for Emma. She knew that while her birth parents had given her life, it was Emma who had given her everything else. Grace decided to focus on the future they were building together rather than dwell on the past. When Grace graduated from high school, she did so with honors, and Emma was there in the front row, cheering louder than anyone else. Grace went on to college, determined to make the most of the opportunities that Emma had worked so hard to give her. She studied social work, driven by a desire to help children who were in situations similar to the one she had been in. Emma's influence was evident in every step Grace took. Her compassion, her determination, her unwavering sense of justice. After college, Grace returned to her old neighborhood, not as a resident, but as someone who could make a difference. She started a non-profit organization aimed at helping abandoned and at-risk children, providing them with the support and love that she had received from Emma. The organization grew rapidly, becoming a beacon of hope for countless children who had nowhere else to turn. Emma watched with pride as Grace flourished, knowing that the little girl she had found in a trash can was now changing the world. And though Emma's life had been filled with challenges, she knew that every struggle had been worth it. Grace was her legacy, a living testament to the power of love and the difference one person could make in the life of another. As Grace stood at the helm of her organization, she often thought back to the day Emma had found her. She knew that her life could have taken a very different path, but she was endlessly grateful that it hadn't. Emma had given her the gift of a future, and now Grace was determined to pass that gift on to as many children as she could. And so, the story of Emma and Grace continued, not just as a tale of survival, but as a story of hope, love, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. Their bond, forged in the coldest of nights and the warmest of hearts, would forever be unbreakable, a shining example of what it truly means to be family. Years passed, and Grace's non-profit organization grew into a nationally recognized institution, helping thousands of children across the country. She became a well-known figure, often invited to speak at conferences and events about her journey and the power of resilience and love. But despite her growing fame, Grace remained grounded, always remembering her roots and the woman who had given her everything. Emma, now older, watched with pride as Grace continued to flourish. The once tired woman who had struggled to make ends meet was now a respected elder in her community, known not just as the woman who had saved a baby, but as the mother of a woman who was changing the world. Emma's health began to decline with age, but her spirit remained as strong as ever. She and Grace shared a deep, unspoken understanding that they had been each other's salvation. One day, Grace was approached by a young woman named Lily, who had recently aged out of the foster care system. Lily had been following Grace's work for years and was inspired by her story. She came to Grace, seeking guidance and hoping to find a place in her organization. There was something in Lily's eyes that reminded Grace of herself, a quiet strength masked by years of hardship, but with a flicker of hope that had not yet been extinguished. Grace welcomed Lily into her organization, and the two quickly formed a bond. Grace saw in Lily the same potential that Emma had seen in her all those years ago. She became a mentor to Lily, guiding her through the challenges of young adulthood and helping her find her path. Lily, in turn, brought new energy and ideas to the organization, helping it grow even further. As time went on, Lily became like a daughter to Grace, and Grace began to understand, on a deeper level, the sacrifices Emma had made for her. She saw how love could transform lives and how the simplest acts of kindness could ripple out to create lasting change. One evening, as Grace and Emma sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset, Grace turned to her mother and said, "You know, Mom, I never fully understood the depth of what you did for me until now. I've seen how helping someone in need can change not just their life, but so many others as well. You didn't just save me that night. You saved every child I've been able to help since then." Emma smiled, her eyes filled with tears of pride and love. "Grace, you were always meant to do great things. I just gave you the start you needed. Everything you've done on your own, with your own heart and strength. I'm just grateful I could be there for you." Grace leaned over and kissed her mother's cheek. "I wouldn't be here without you. And neither would any of those kids. You've changed the world, Mom, through me and through them." In the years that followed, Grace continued to expand her organization, and Lily became her right hand, taking on more responsibilities as Grace's focus shifted toward spending more time with Emma. Grace made sure to cherish every moment with her mother, knowing that time was precious. When Emma eventually passed away peacefully in her sleep, Grace was heartbroken, but she found solace in knowing that her mother had lived a full life, filled with love and purpose. At Emma's funeral, people from all walks of life came to pay their respects. Children, now grown, who had been helped by Grace's organization, neighbors who had been touched by Emma's kindness, and even the couple who had once tried to reclaim Grace, now old themselves and full of gratitude for the life Emma had given their daughter. Grace stood before the crowd, holding back tears as she spoke about her mother. Emma was the kind of person who didn't just see the world as it was, but as it could be. She taught me that love is the most powerful force we have, and that one act of kindness can change the course of a life. I am who I am because of her, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to live up to the example she set. As Grace continued her work, she carried Emma's legacy with her, pouring the love she had received into every child she helped. The organization flourished, and Grace's story, intertwined with Emma's, became a beacon of hope for all those who faced seemingly insurmountable odds. And so, Emma's love lived on, not just in Grace, but in every life Grace touched. It was a testament to the enduring power of kindness, the strength of a mother's love, and the belief that even in the darkest of times, hope can always be found, sometimes in the most unexpected places. This additional continuation emphasizes the lasting impact of Emma's love and how Grace, inspired by her mother, continues to change the world. It also introduces a new character, Lily, who represents the next generation touched by Grace's, and therefore Emma's, legacy. As the years passed, Grace's non-profit organization became a national symbol of hope and transformation. She was recognized for her work, receiving awards and accolades, but none of that mattered as much to her as the impact she was able to make on the lives of those who needed it most. The legacy of Emma's love and sacrifice was woven into every aspect of Grace's life, guiding her every decision and inspiring her every action. One winter evening, much like the one on which Emma had found her, Grace found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. She sat alone in her office, surrounded by photos and mementos from years of work, pictures of smiling children, thank-you letters from families, and awards recognizing her contributions. But the item that caught her eye was a small, worn blanket, carefully preserved in a glass case on her desk. It was the very blanket she had been wrapped in when Emma had found her all those years ago. Grace reached out and touched the glass, feeling the weight of the past and the significance of that single moment. She thought of Emma, the woman who had taken a helpless child into her arms and given her everything: life, love, and a future. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Just then, there was a knock on her office door. Wiping away her tears, Grace called for the visitor to enter. It was Lily, now a confident young woman who had grown into her role as Grace's partner in running the organization. She carried a file in her hands and a warm smile on her face. "Hey, Grace," Lily said softly, noticing the tearful look in her mentor's eyes. "Are you okay?" Grace nodded, her voice steady despite the emotion bubbling beneath the surface. "I'm just thinking about how far we've come, Lily. About how one act of love can change the world." Lily smiled, her admiration for Grace evident. "You've done that, Grace. You've changed the world, just like Emma did. And because of you, so many children will have the chance to do the same." Grace stood up, her heart full as she walked over to Lily. She took the young woman's hands in hers, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. "It's not just me, Lily. It's all of us, Emma, you, every child we've helped. We're all part of something bigger, something beautiful. And that's what makes it all worth it." Lily handed Grace the file she was holding. "I think you should see this. It's a letter from a young girl we helped a few years ago. She's graduating high school and wrote to thank us for everything. She says she wants to study social work so she can help others the way we helped her." Grace opened the letter and began to read, tears streaming down her face as she took in the girl's heartfelt words. It was a perfect reminder of why she did what she did, a testament to the enduring impact of her mother's love. "I think Emma would be proud of us," Lily said quietly, her voice full of emotion. Grace nodded, her heart swelling with pride and love. "She would. And I'm proud of us too, Lily. We're carrying her legacy forward, one child at a time." That night, as Grace left the office, she looked up at the sky, the stars twinkling brightly above. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that Emma's spirit was with her, guiding her every step. The little girl who had been found in a trash can have grown into a woman who was making a difference in the world, all because one woman had chosen love over fear, hope over despair. As she walked home through the quiet streets, Grace thought about the countless lives she had touched, the children who now had a future because of her mother's love. And she knew, deep in her heart, that Emma's legacy would continue to live on, not just through her, but through every life she helped to transform. When Grace arrived home, she sat by the window, just as Emma had done so many years ago. She gazed out at the world, filled with gratitude and contentment. And in that moment, she knew that her journey, though filled with challenges and heartbreak, had been one of extraordinary love and purpose. With a gentle smile, Grace whispered into the night, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." And as she drifted off to sleep, she felt a warmth surrounding her, as if Emma herself were wrapping her in a comforting embrace. The love that had begun in that cold alleyway all those years ago had blossomed into something beautiful, something eternal. And so, the story of Grace and Emma came full circle, a testament to the enduring power of love, the impact of kindness, and the belief that even in the darkest of places, hope can always be found, sometimes in the arms of a mother who chooses to see the light in the midst of the darkness. This emotional ending brings the story to a close with a focus on the lasting impact of Emma's love, the continuation of her legacy through grace, and the powerful message that one act of kindness can indeed change the world. As you've journeyed through this heartwarming and inspiring story, I hope you've been reminded of the incredible power of love, kindness, and resilience. Emma's decision to embrace a helpless child changed not only Grace's life, but also the lives of countless others. This is the impact that one person can have when they choose love over fear and hope over despair. Now, it's your turn to make a difference. Whether it's offering a helping hand, showing compassion to someone in need, or simply spreading kindness in your daily life, you too can change the world, one act of love at a time. If this story has touched your heart, share it with others and let them know that no matter how small an act of kindness might seem, it has the potential to create ripples that can transform lives. Together, we can build a world where love and hope always prevail. Subscribe to our channel for more uplifting and inspiring stories, and remember, every act of kindness counts. Be the light in someone else's darkness, and watch how that light spreads.